Now, I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Muhammad Yunus Yassin to continue our program with the ASTI Socrates Dialogue AST. Please welcome, sir.
Sri Azman, former CEO of Khazanah and my former boss, right? Mr. Khailee Ng, managing partner at US venture capital firm 500 Global. Rafi, my close friend, with CIMB Foundation and CIB Transaction, right? Yeah. Dato DP Naban, our long-term supporter at ASTI. Mr. Anandan, Dato Ignasywaran, one of my oldest friends from Universiti days. Welcome today for the next session, which is the ASTI Socrates Dialogue. So maybe I'll very quickly mention to you why we are doing this. Because we've been doing this program with school kids and secondary school students for the last 18 years actually, right? And you know, in education, we always talk about why do we get educated? And all the time people say we get educated so that people can start thinking for themselves, right? And yet, over the years, it would seem that the rote learning process, you know, the memorizing and all that is actually, you know, whenever someone comes and said, look, we need to get people to think, what happens is they put in more into the syllabus, so you end up students having to memorize even more, and then become even more rote learning. So over the years, although we say that we want the students to think, it has gone the other way. Although the policy is to get students to think, what really happens is the other way around, right? So this is why we have, we are engaging on this program for the first time. No? And of course, thinking is about philosophy, right? And philosophy is not something that's taught in schools. And unfortunately, it's not even taught in universities now, right? Which is very sad. I'll just give you a quick background about myself. Thank you, I was not expecting that. I'm blushing a bit, because you can't see it, right? But when I was a student, a much younger student, back in those days, okay, I'm not that old, but there was this movie called Rebel Without a Cause. Okay, I'm not that old. I saw it 20 years, because it came out in 1955. I saw it in 1980 when I was like in, lower secondary school, right? And it's this by this actor who died early, which is very sad for me because he was an excellent actor. And James Dean, correct, James Dean. And I always thought, what does this movie mean actually, right? And I always wanted to ask that question, what is this rebel without a cause? Only then later on did I realize that what it really means is, you know, when we are young, we go through schooling, we go through all the systems and all that, and there's some kind of annoying feeling within us, even as students, even as young people, that there's something not right, you know, with the system, with the education system, with everything, right? So we tend to rebel, you know. So some people rebel in the heart. Some people actually show their rebellion. When I was young, I was very timid. I was very introverted. So I rebelled, but then more on the heart. So I was just fed up with the system, fed up with the education system and stuff like that. So it kind of had an effect on me. And so there's this feeling that I do not know, there is something wrong, but I do not know what is wrong. And that's why it hit me like it's rebel without a cause, because we don't have a cause yet. We know there's something wrong, but we do not know what it is, right, as young people. And I'm sure most of you, including YB, because YB is an activist, always is, and we hope you always will be, right? As a young person, there was this issue of, you know, not being happy with how it is, but then we do not know what to do about it, nor do we know, right? Only as time goes on, in my case, right, so I talk personally, over the years, only when I went to UK, in Cambridge, I had a group of friends, and we used to have discussions, like a dialogue, you know, with friends and all that, and these are PhD students and stuff like that. And that's when I realized that there is a way to make a change, and that's when we become rebel with a cause, right, as you grow older, right? And so, for me, it is very important for young people that, you know, we always say to the young people, hey, why you up on you always complain, stuff like that. But that's part of a growing up process, I would think, right? That we start being a rebel because we want a better world, right? And then as we grow older, we understand the system better, then we know how to make a change or know where we would sit in the change process, in the change maker. And that's when we get our cause, right? A lot of people say, get the cause first, then be a rebel, right? But actually, the process, the natural process is we be a rebel first, then we get the cause, because that's how a lot of people, if you talk to a lot of people who are change makers today, that is the process, right? So this is what we are trying to do. So this is the first dialogue session for young people to start talking and have conversations within themselves to find that cause within themselves, And we are using it because Socrates was, of course, my favorite philosopher, right? So we are using the Socrates dialogue as a means. So there's a method. So I'm not going to bore you with that method, but it's a very interesting method. But this is a method which is on all traditions have this method. So in the Islamic tradition, we have people like Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Rushd and all that who use the same method, same way. I wouldn't say method, it's not necessarily Socrates dialogue, but a dialogue session in which they try to find the truth. And then we got Buddha in the mindfulness on how he questioned himself. So dialogue is about questioning, So in the case of Buddha, he was questioning himself. In other people, they question others, right? So the whole idea is to get the questions right. Because in our education system, again, we are always taught to find the answers. Never or very seldom are we trained to ask the right questions, right? So again, this is what we are trying to do here. So again, this is a first attempt. Please forgive us for any shortcomings or whatever. But we hope that this will continue. And we hope that if this method comes into play, we want young people, old people, mixture of people to have this kind of conversation to understand where they stand in the bigger scheme of things, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming. So may I invite the first participants of the Socrates Dialogue. First, I would like to invite Brother Imran. Where is Imran? The handsome Imran, let's give him a clap. Don't you dare say he's not handsome, because you never hear the end of the day. Okay, and then so he is our moderator. His job is to ask questions. Prof. Ulung, Dato Dr. Rajah, Tan Sri Azman, and Khailee. This guy really is the most handsome guy. Okay, with that, I would like to pass the chair or this one over to Imran. Go for it. Thank you guys for coming again.
Okay. I'll just do this part here. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Socrates Dialogue. The reason I'm up here was given away by Yunus in his intro. It's not because of my intellect, but it's because I'm handsome. The intellect all comes from here. This is actually the first time since before COVID that I've moderated anything, so I'm very worried that I may have lost my mojo, but we'll see how it goes. But Yunus asked me, so of course I had to do it. So our subject today, of course, is a discourse on building a better world post-COVID-19, economics, entrepreneurship, and livelihood. And for that, we have three very distinguished and intellectual participants. I will just briefly introduce each of them. We have Professor Rajah, who is a distinguished professor of economics at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya, as well as currently having advisory positions at Oxford and Cambridge. His very distinguished career in economics has focused on technological capabilities and industrial policies. He's also currently ASTI's advisor on economics of technology. He has the highest modesty quotient I've ever encountered, which is the ratio of the highest level of distinction to the shortest introduction that he requested. So welcome, Professor. We have also today Tan Sri Azman Mokhtar, who's currently the chairman of several entities, including Lembaga Tabung Haji, INCF, Universiti Teknologi, Malaysia, and others. He's probably best known for being the managing director of Khazanah Nasional for about 14 years. And it was during this time that I worked for him for about 8 years. But despite working for him all that time at Khazanah, today will be the first time that I will be able to say things to him like, "Stop speaking now, please. I completely disagree. I've never heard such nonsense in my life." I'm just kidding, Tan Sri. I know you're one of the best connected people in this town, so just a little joke there. And then, our third distinguished speaker is Khailee Ng, a managing partner at the US venture capital firm 500 Global. He's led more than 180 seed investments in Southeast Asia amongst tech startups. And he also was a founder of Group Small, which was acquired by Groupon, and Malaysia's largest online media company, Says.com, which was acquired by Media Prime. So he's very much a leading light in the investment community. By the way, Khailee, I've saved 50 big ones. Could you help me invest them at all?
50 big ones, like $50 million?
No, 50 pounds sterling. All right, never mind. Okay.
Accept cash.
So what they'll be discussing today, and the format will be, each one will speak for about 4 or 5 minutes on the subject, and then we'll have a moderated discussion, and then we will actually have a fully interactive discussion with the audience. But my thoughts on this initially, a better world post-COVID-19, is first a discourse on building such a world. Is first of all, are we post-COVID-19? How do we know we're post-COVID-19? What are the criteria? What's our definition of a better world? Better for who? And do we actually build the world? Or is the world shaped by various competing forces, and the most influential of those forces has the greatest influence? So, without further ado, I will ask Professor Rajah first to come and give his intro. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking, of course, the handsome Imran and the main organizer, Dr. Yunus. And nice that you've organized bringing back some of our friends. And then, of course, the audience here willing to listen to us. The topic sounded somewhat abstract for me. I did raise this point because on what context, what vantage point are we going to start? If we're going to talk about COVID, we don't really have, apart from taking Dr. Yunus' position, that we become a rebel without really knowing exactly what to do. It's just like if you think a developed country with so-called norms will do well, you know that there's no such relationship at all from the COVID cases as well as deaths. Vietnam probably did a lot better than the US. Likewise, you can have a free world country, Taiwan, which also did equally well. Now, coming back to this point, then given the fact that Imran has given that much of freedom, instead of me picking anything specific, although of course Socrates and philosophy, every field was from philosophy, although of course fields like economics, they forgot once the umbilical cord was cut, they forgot that's what Amartya Sen says. Now, I'll just make a point that we should have a world where you don't have a few powers dominating the world. We can go back to Karl Polanyi. If we are going to continue to experience a world where the powerful dictates, then you need not necessarily translate into what each and every one want for themselves. Although that sounds like ideal, in a way, an utopian state may not exist. But that's what I would mean, that there should be a movement towards within the UN body, not the type that we got when Bung Karno eventually he died, I don't want to get involved in the details about how he died, or even Allende from Chile. But we should move to a world where there will be more accountability, there are more people saying things that reflect the interest of everyone. The word interest was mentioned just now. That it manifests in every decision that's made when it comes to power. So it's translated in ways where we know global multilateral bodies are there, not taking the interest of a few in an instrumentalist sense, but are there to take care of the interest of everyone. Thank you. I hope I didn't exceed the time.
No, that's fine. Thank you. We can keep that.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, YB and everybody, a big thank you to my old friend, Dr. Yunus. And it was such a pleasure to hear YB telling some Yunus stories. We all have quite a few of our own, each and every one of us. I had the good fortune of meeting Yunus for the first time in about 20 years ago, as a rather elderly and late comer to university to do my master's. He was doing his PhD at Cambridge. And indeed, I think he was sharpening himself, still finding a course at that time, to be fair. And I think quite a few things he mentioned in the intro resonated. One of it is, you have to sharpen yourself. So a bit like the laser. So since we are on a science forum, I'm not a science person. My field is more finance, I suppose. But apparently they found the laser first before they found the solution. This is true. This is very famous in the history of science, which is the point for today on all this better world post-COVID. I think to me that lesson, the intipati, the real philosophy, I suppose, is be prepared. Get ready. Sharpen your laser because there will be opportunities, right? The second thing I thought, quite a few things, but I thought the second thing worth highlighting, you talk about do we know to the people that you've been serving, the Tamil schools and so on and so forth. They ask, right? What's all this about? Is how to think critically, how to ask the right questions, right? Because in this day and age of, we used to say Google, now we got to say, what is it called, Khailee? Chat GPT. You can answer just about freaking anything, right? The question is, do you know what is the right question or not? What's the right question to ask? You can just about get answer for just about anything. The issue is whether you know, and that I believe AI will never replicate because it's not wise enough. And therefore our critical advantage, whether to build a better world, which we of course we want to do, is our humanity. Because the robot can never replace that, I believe. Not just hope, actually we believe, right? Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Okay, so as the first round in the round robin, I guess 3 key points. So to unpack the topic, no need to be too complicated. Are we post-COVID? Probably is. Otherwise we'll be wearing masks right now, right? Number 2, better world. Sure, this is contested, disputed, what is better, etc. But I think roughly all of us know how to go from left-hand side, what is on the right-hand side of the page versus what is on the left-hand side of the page, right? So 2 axes, X and Y. The X is, I guess, time, but the Y is, you want to move from lower to, economists would say, higher equilibrium, basically, right? The issue is how, really. And are we at this juncture? There's lots of moan and groan. Yes, there's a ton of challenges, too many to name, which we can discuss, I suppose, later if you want. But to me, we can boil this down to, are we half full, half empty? I'm of the school, maybe I'm crazy, or hopefully crazy, not mad, got difference, must be crazy. Rebel must be crazy, right? Change maker must be crazy, but not mad. It still must be anchored on reality. I think I'm always on the optimist side, because I always believe in hope, in the human spirit, that will out, and human spirit can translate into, entrepreneurship and so on and so forth. So the second point is, amidst all this, opportunity, and 60% full, with the potential to go to 70, 80% full. In fact, as we know, tough times create tough people, right? Tough folks, right? And the reverse or the converse also holds. Just before I came here in Tabung Haji, I was so happy. A 94-year-old man, about to be 95, this gentleman, Tan Sri Yahya Ibrahim. I don't really know him. He knew my late father, Kirby trained teacher, educationist, legend. This guy is a legend. 95-year-old. Went through Zaman Jepun, the Japanese occupation, and he told me all these stories. I mean, that generation, right? Those who went through the war, Dave, I'm sure, different, right? Today, we all, every generation laments about the next one, and vice versa. But I think this point about, yes, it is challenging, but out of this hot crucible will come out strong men and women of steel, I think. And finally, action. That one maybe I'll save it for later. I try to frame, for me at least 5, the way I try to structure, 5 calls to action in different parts. But I think we'll save that for later, perhaps, if there's time. Thank you.
Thank you. I was still too scared to say stop speaking now, please. Anyway, Khailee, please.
Hi, everyone. Good reflection, rebel without a cause. I hope all of us still have many more causes for the shared rebellion we have in this room. Okay, so I think I'll kind of have my opening remarks maybe in the form of a contradiction that I personally grapple with. I think on one hand, being a venture capitalist and investing in entrepreneurs and giving them, sometimes a bit too much money for that they've never been able to handle, but requires some degree of optimism. Otherwise, why am I doing this? So, on one hand, I think that we're in an era of more abundance, financial access, and freedom than ever before. But on the other hand, I would also argue that we're in an era of the most dangerous kind of slavery that so much of us are part of. So allow me to kind of build on that a bit. The kind of era of freedom and abundance that we have right now, never before, 60, 80 years ago, a lot of the Ivy League schools didn't allow women to be part of their universities. A lot of free online education versus free online education today, and a lot of Ivy Leagues giving free education, and a lot of chances to get different kind of loans, different kind of support, more than it was 50, 60 years ago. In fact, on a very personal level, my father grew up in a family of rubber tappers, migrant family to Malaysia. 11 brothers and sisters, the life savings, so my dad could go to college so that he could buy a computer. And because he bought a computer, that's why me and my brothers, we could get involved with the internet economy, and that's why I could build 2 companies before the age of 30 and list it on the Bursa and so on and so forth, right? But I've tested that concept of abundance to the extreme. With our venture capital firm, we invested in 81 countries, just give young entrepreneurs just some seed capital. 12 years later, 49 companies are worth more than $1 billion US. Melanie Perkins' Canva, first check investment, that's worth $26 billion US. We have fintech company in Nigeria worth $2 billion US. Portugal, so and so forth. Down to Indonesia, even here in Malaysia. Early investor in MyTaxi, now Grab, and first check in Kasam. These billion-dollar companies just started as ideas just like this, just a handful of years ago. Generational wealth can be created with technology just a handful of years, proven time and time again. But at what cost? Now this era of slavery that I described, people think of it as consumer choice, but how much of that is sugar addiction? How long are corporates going to exploit the fact that our dopamine circuitry is there for the exploiting? How much is it that we have 2 billion people using social media, and if comparison is the thief of joy, how much time and joy is robbed from the comparison on social media right now? I can go on with all these kinds of very subtle types of slavery and these kinds of subtle addiction, because why I call it dangerous is because you think it's freedom. But you are chained to the fact that you want to buy the next thing on Shopee and the 11/11 sale is coming and then you're going to get some good discount, and makes you want to buy something right now, doesn't it? So I kind of conclude my opening remarks by saying that we've got 4 billion people connected to the internet, but we've another 4 billion people who are not. And if we're going to continue building things for the rest of the world and use technology to create this better world post-COVID, we need to think about how we can engage the rest of the 4 billion people in a productive manner to utilize this invisible hand of capitalism, not just for self-interest, but to tip self-interest in a direction where benevolence and compassion, there's room for that too. Then maybe we can see the real AI. Maybe you can see the real peer-to-peer technology, right? When people start helping each other and that kind of economics of benevolence start to tick into the machinery. So of course, there's a lot to unpack here. I think there's enough brain power in this room to perpetuate this conversation way more than the time allotted, but I appreciate you having me to be a part of this as well.
Thank you so much for those introductory remarks. Just a housekeeping question. I've been told that you can, in the audience, you can write down questions during the dialogue and they'll be passed to me and I can refer to them throughout the dialogue. So I think pieces of paper and so on are available to do that. So it's quite a broad topic and we've had fascinating insights on it to begin with. A possible accusation that it's too broad, that's my fault. Let me just ask, so we can agree that we are in a post-COVID world. It may not be quite over, but we're definitely, as Tan Sri Azman observed, we're sitting here without masks, which is a huge change from about 2.5 years ago. Will the world resume the same path economically that it was on before? How is that path measured, i.e. GDP growth and so on, and is that the desired path and the desired measurements? Would anyone like to start on that?
Thank you. I saw the question. I'm sure you all have heard about this index, gross national happiness. Now, I'm not sure whether people actually go back and track to see what Simon Kuznets and James Mead, these Harvard and Cambridge guys, did with national accounts. They were looking at how governments can plan. They were not looking at social well-being. Unfortunately, the attempts that they made to see that they can actually engender the conditions for economies to grow, so they create jobs. And of course, for the economy to expand. Now, in that cause, of course, people end up comparing countries' growth rates. The initial purpose was just those individual countries. World bodies, of course, start comparing all this. And then subsequently, they say, well, housewife's work is not there. It's very gender unfriendly. Now, why do you want governments to get involved in households with housewives? Now, I have seen the work of both Kuznets and James Mead. In fact, I've even studied in a place where James Mead worked. My own feeling is, yes, you have to accept that GDP has its limitations, but that was not what GDP was meant for. That has to be taken into account. So, and if you're dealing with social well-being, then yes, you can get into those areas. And you started off earlier with this notion that are we going to come out of COVID? I think that's a very interesting vantage point that you raised. Are we going back to the business as usual sort of scenario that existed before that? I think as we were getting into COVID, we were already embracing IR 4.0, digitalization as well as digitization. Now, if you look at how Taiwan relocated agriculture and manufacturing from China to Taiwan, a lot of it started because of attempts that led to trade friction. You would have had, I'm sure you would have heard that Huawei no longer was able to access microchips that TSMC was producing, or for that matter, UMC was producing. In fact, what Huawei used to do is to import these chips, largely the ones dealing with gallium arsenide, because the radio frequency is higher for handphones. Now, those things used to go to its subsidiary HiSilicon, adapted and then used in the phones. Then, of course, there were these restrictions that were imposed. Now, at the same time, Taiwan brought back manufacturing and agriculture with robots. Let me mention to you that it's interesting because some countries are so fluid, they have the mechanisms to do things, to track and absorb shocks much in a way better way. For example, now, rice self-sufficiency in Taiwan is 93%. We had the highest in Malaysia in 1976 when Tun Razak died, 87%. Likewise, all horticultural products, including fruity vegetables, as well as vegetables, self-sufficiency not below 80%. And you can see in Taiwan, where you don't actually have to be there the way AI functions. You can have robots, they get up themselves, they go milk the cow, plow the fields. We have so much of problems dealing with palm oil here, fruits rotting and so on. But I have actually seen that on the ground. That's my main area of work, although I work on the economics of technology. So my feeling is there are lots of new things coming out, some of them driven from the top. Carbon net zero, we are supposed to achieve by 2050. Now, these things are there, but studies on that, without any clear direction, somewhat like how you began with, rebel without a cause. We had every university, because they think this is the way journals are going, they were building on it, until suddenly the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, started, especially from the Paris Accord. So my feeling is, so long as we build these capabilities, these capacities, recognizing that the world will always be uncertain, that it's just like who expected from 1918, the Spanish flu, would recur again about 100 years later. But it did. But some countries had a much better way of tracking it, of addressing it, even though they may not have been developed. So I think those things are important in dealing and understanding what are we looking at, what are we measuring. Not only that, relating it to what you need for your country, especially if you're government running the show. Thank you.
Please, both of you hang on to a mic each and feel free to share.
Yeah, Imran, if I heard you, is the path of the world going to change? Are we going to measure the same things, or will it be different? Well, let's put it this way. I think if the issue about did we actually learn something during COVID, I think we did. We did as a species, you know. Some proof points, if I may. I'm chairing Tabung Haji, so I was quite surprised because people were withdrawing money from EPF. But in spite of, RCI and whatever else, this one was going up. So, hypothesis, I can't really prove it. Maybe people thought more about, hey, I'm mortal. Donation levels actually, I'm told, went up in spite of, tightness in the economy. So again, slightly anecdotal, but my own belief is people were more introspective. There were, of course, all kinds of pros and cons. Learning loss, for example, in the field of education, I don't think we are paying enough attention. And I used to sit on this National Recovery Council. I kept harping, long story. Okay. So I think there was some reflection, there were some efforts. However, men and women are forgetful. So we will probably revert to, pun intended, to mean at some point. Sadly, I hope I'm wrong, but I think if history tells us something, we tend to forget. We tend to forget. I think Dr. Mahathir is right. He said, mudah lupa. Actually, it's not just Tun M. There's, I think, some verses, at least in the scripture I'm familiar with. Melayu mudah lupa, dia kata, sudah lupa. And then you always say, apa nama, but never mind. So whereas, the scripture I'm familiar with, the Quran, actually, there's some verses. We are kind of forgetful as a species, right? However, I think we also show, you spoke about Polanyi, right, the great transformation. I think that there are certain junctures in history that, humankind come together, and can we actually change that circle? Possible. And in that regard, we ask the change makers, the change agents, the wayfinders, the hackers, how are we going to change this trajectory, right? I think some are mentioned here: technology, capital. Of course, Khailee is that. Entrepreneurship. These are very powerful levers, but sketch, some of these are tools, right? It can go either way. So therefore, I think, for example, the ESG movement. Wow, so nice. When we were at Khazanah, we tried to articulate and do this thing called the stakeholder economy, 0405. So shareholder economy, Milton Friedman and all those stuff was right up there in the primacy, right? Lehman happened. Then everybody started talking SDG, ESG, which is good. And then got too much MSG, lots of goreng that you have to get through. Similarly, tech. If I'm not mistaken, Google's slogan used to be "Do no evil," right? It's no longer there, right? Why? Why did they took it out? But anyway, gone public. Do no evil, must make money, right? Must make money. So, entrepreneurship, good. Of course, so my point is, these are powerful levers. As a species, we are always given these tools. The issue is whether you can use these tools well or the reverse, right? It's always double-edged, right? And therefore, you have to ask, what is it that will actually, the GPS, the one, so that's a tool, but where you go, in what direction, how fast, because the tools are powerful, very powerful. As you say, abundance of money, etc. Technology, science. I mean, for example, vaccines, right? Talk about COVID-19. Actually, quite amazing, right? The fact that we're sitting down here is because, large part is there's vaccine. But the fact that we probably can't do this in parts of Africa is also because of humankind as well. Our inability to distribute properly, right? For all the reasons. So therefore, what is it? You want to call it morality, you want to call it law, regulations, government, civil society. I think that is the key. How we behave individually, institutionally, as a country, between countries, is really the key. Because I think that is an opportunity. I'm quite, and that is our story. This is both our great gift, choice, and also our burden, no? As a species, and I think we can. I'm what do you call it? Eternal optimist. Hopefully realist. And again, the calls to action, I will save it for later. But so my point is that we can change the course. I think we'll. I mean, there's a rather depressing book called The Great Leveler. Some Stanford professor. Question he wanted to ask: 3,000 years of inequality. He was trying to basically concluded the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is what really makes fundamental change. War, pestilence, including pandemics, revolution. People are so fed up, they just say, I got nothing more to lose, right? And the 4th one is, I understood it as like a few things, including ecological collapse, right? So all this sounds like eerily familiar. On the other hand, the clever elites, etc., I think they give us scraps, so that, as they say, give them bread and circus, or nowadays, rice and football, something like that. So that we like, lupa not enough to be angry, to make change. But the great changes are really happening usually at this kind of turning points, right? If you think about it, tough times create, tough conditions create tough people. Hopefully we find the right GPS, because that one to me is still the key. Thank you.
I'd like to pull together a few points that I think Professor Rajah as well as Tan Sri Azman, you've mentioned. I think that the metrics, gross national happiness, and some attempts, right, at an alternative or complementary metric to GDP has always been attempted. I don't think enough momentum has gotten behind it yet. And then some of the clues behind some better metrics, so-called better metrics, could be investigated, taking from some seeds of the examples that I think Tan Sri Azman has said. Now, I was a little bit skeptical of gross national happiness myself, so I decided to spend 10 days in Bhutan last year. So I had the former press secretary to the Prime Minister of the King of Bhutan. He was pro modernization of Bhutan. He created the first radio station, the first TV station in Bhutan. He helped the king popularize this gross national happiness. Spent 10 days with this guy, okay? Hike into some monasteries and other things, right? I wanted to know, are people happy in Bhutan? Is Bhutan rich? What is Bhutan dependent on? And he said, what, it's so far so good. The metric is good. Help capture something that was originally already there. There is 1,000-year kind of like shared understanding and culture and tradition in Bhutan, right? They're just creating a metric to measure something that was already there. But economically, I said, has this helped? Has gross national happiness actually helped your GDP? Said that, help with tourism, help with a little bit of like noticing, but the GDP depends a lot on clean energy right now, and they're selling most of their electric power to India. So what they're worried is India's also building their water capacity. When India stops buying from Bhutan, then we may have a problem, right? So he says that GDP in and of itself is still an issue because there still is so-called progress to be made for the livelihoods and quality of life for some people in Bhutan. Now, what other metrics could be interesting then, right? If gross national happiness cannot tie into gross domestic product and become a complementary twin turbine, right? That would help, get the example for progress, then what do we have? I don't have the answer today, but like I'm on an active investigation of this. And I think that cluing into one Tan Sri Azman has mentioned during the tough times, creating tough people, I'm particularly fascinated again with this random acts of kindness. I'm fascinated with what turns somebody to put their self-interest behind and try to care for somebody else. During Malaysia's peak of its pandemic, we had that Bendera Putih movement, if you remember. So some folks are like, hey, I don't have enough food, I'm gonna put this white flag or white sock or this white singlet outside my home, and then I will start giving some money, right? Then maybe some people give me some food or money or whatnot. So I have a few friends. My wife, her entire career is in social work, so she's involved in food distribution to homeless and so on and so forth. We have friends in the scene that we went to give money, and we found that like a lot of folks volunteered actively to do it, and not all of them are M40, not all of them are rich. That's the interesting thing. Then we look at donor behavior when I look at the donor behavior data within her non-profit that she leads, you find that the people who donate a lot of money are actually less than 10 ringgit. They're like, who are these people? Then they investigate the people who donate less than 10 ringgit a year. A lot of them are the recipients themselves of the food, of the free food, and So it's really interesting to see, right? Now, if I can understand, if we understand now, if companies have understood how your dopamine response can trigger addiction, and how it can make you addicted to TikTok and Instagram, how can addicted to Nestle products or whatnot, can I also discover what is it in your brain that triggers benevolence and helping other people? Can I trigger that proactively? Can I do that to the extent I can measure it? Okay, so now I'll end the kind of response of here for a better world with, we can already measure if any household, how much household debt, whether an individual is poor or in debt, right, or not wealthy. We can measure whether someone in Malaysia is wealthier than somebody else. Can we measure if someone is more benevolent than someone else? Can we measure someone who's a bigger philanthropist than somebody else? And there are many other Malaysians which I feel are on this mission to actually help Malaysia realize its own benevolence and to actually make it more measured and more pronounced. And then when it becomes mainstream cultural norm to be more giving, then you can see a society built on individualism and the me move from me to we. And again, still vague, abstract concepts, but I hope a lot of you are on the same mission together, right? And we can just scratch at this a little bit more.
Well, there are many streams we could explore right now. One is the meaning of GDP. One is about psychology and happiness. I just have an anecdote myself. I went to see a spiritual teacher, and he said to me, "Grasshopper, when will you be happy?" I said, "Great teacher, I'll be happy when I have more money." He said, "Get out of here, I don't want to see you ever again." But anyway, this actually ties in with the question we've just had from Vanitha. It's a very riveting topic. However, I would like to know, how are we moving forward within the psychological realm of youth after COVID? It does affect the resilience of our future generation. So, multiple directions: GDP, happiness, psychology. Your thoughts?
Let me just give you an example, because we have a few minutes, right, to answer questions. Then, of course, we can discuss that. We often hear the term inclusiveness, and whether this report is inclusive. The actual meaning of it, the way at least I can comprehend, it comes from the book by Peter Berger, Pyramids of Sacrifice. He was basically telling us that policymakers who are in Brasilia making decisions never got to the place where they were targeting, which is the Amazon. So you have the Marathon, it goes piranhas and so on, Negroes, then Amazon flows out of Bellum. Now they are making decisions to turn this forest to farm corn, Now what he says is, you have these guys who have not been there, and he makes a very simple analogy. Feelings that are real for those looking at it are not the same as those who are feeling it. What more for those fellows who are in Brasilia? They don't even look at the people who are feeling whatever their feeling is. Now, does this translate into the way GDP is measured? Or even if we go to gross national happiness? A profound study that I saw in Denmark, from Europe, it was Denmark that had the highest score at that time, Bhutan in the world. But that's simply because they have very low expectations. See, you remember that when Tun Mahathir was talking about, he doesn't want to see the Penans in Bakun up there living only for 40 years. Same in Bhutan, life expectancy is 40 years. He wanted them down, but he was making decisions simply by looking at indicators which he thought, if we are interpreting it today, that's inclusive because we're looking at indicators of the poor, but is that what they are looking at? Now, if they're comfortable with that, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But there's so much of subjectivity involved in this. So much so, what Amartya Sen and Stiglitz have done, they were given this set of funds to come up with an alternative measure. But what have they come up with? I'm not comfortable with that too. Various different indicators of poverty, various different indicators of satisfaction, which you can measure. It's like, this one will tell you very much. If you go down deep into history, how is GDP actually measured, or for that matter, when the Soviet Union collapsed, you need to have data for Ukraine when it was within Soviet Union. They have this Cambridge multi-sectoral model. Now, what is important is, as you go deeper and deeper, the proxies you have far less. There's no perfect statistics as such. Then how do we then draw this up subsequently? That's why Angus Madsen, the man who's done most of this work, has died. He was at OECD. He made this point very clear when first India, then China became the largest economies in the world. And then he's expecting them to come back. But we'll have to look at how these things were measured. It's just like now we want to see whether this country is progressing. But what is the measure you're using? If you're comfortable, then that's okay. That's why I was mentioning GDP originated by these two Nobel laureates, James Mead and Simon Kuznets, because they were looking at government planning. How should the state invest in what sectors, which sectors will generate the highest rate of return or spillover for that matter. That's how it was planned. It was not planned to say whether people are happy. Or, it was never meant to measure well-being. Then today we hear a lot of them attacking these guys. But to me, they're misplaced. And the second thing is, while it's true that GDP doesn't measure the work of housewives, but you want government to get involved in what they do? Of course, I wouldn't like that. I'm sure my own wife wouldn't like that. So that's why I feel it's nice to look at everything. Then you make this, if you're comfortable with it, then so be it, you can continue with that. So I feel that very often we're discussing concepts and so on in different ways. Everyone has their own notion of what it means. And then of course, and more often than not, it doesn't tend to give you an impression that they have a comprehensive understanding of it, and therefore they end up creating a straw man and demolishing it. So my own feeling is it's nice to look at that, and we should also bring in all these questions that are raised, because in the end, what are we looking for? So I shall not pass the cue back to.
Yeah, quick one. If the question is about youth, I think my only qualification to talk as I'm a father of 4, I suppose they are in the youth category. The youngest is 22, the eldest is 30. And, I've done some stuff into education. I chair a public university with 25,000 students. About 60% are B40 actually. I think my own observation with all those caveats is really, I think this is an age of anxiety. As you know, perhaps apart from COVID, the other epidemic is really mental health, as you know. And this seems to cut across many things, right? Income, etc., right? So those in, Ivy League University in Oxbridge, those guys are stressed out. How many internships do you have? What those kind of stuff, right? And then you got stuff around social media, gender fluidity, jobs, etc. Again, so you put all this together. So I'm actually a bit concerned. I don't understand enough. Granted, I try to have a conversation, but I guess every generation goes through this, I suppose. Khailee, I mean, you're probably closer to Sunday. Okay, so I'll make that point. Maybe just to add, so happened, very coincidentally, I'm on a team that is actually advising Bhutan for the World Bank right now, as it turns out. No, my part is on sovereign funds. frankly, and this so-called team of experts, you probably know some of them, Prof from SOAS and Copenhagen University, etc. Frankly, after a month, first of all, I went for 9 days, not quite 10 days, just to check it out. Right? Me and my wife hold the record for going up the Tiger's Nest. Our guide of 20 years says, "Sir, you hold the record." For what? For the longest. It took us 8 hours to get up there and back. But actually, at least we finished. About 30% don't finish. But anyway. So after 1 month, I concluded, I think this should be the other way around. We should be learning from these guys rather than the other way around. No, that's probably a little bit of dramatization. The truth somewhere in between. Do you know apparently 30% alcoholism is a problem? Bored youth. Jobs ni, they are like in between all these superpowers. They sell too much to India. China is on this side. They're quite anxious. The king is a real visionary. The guy actually gave up his absolute monarchy, and then they said, this what's the capital? They had traffic light, and then they decided don't want traffic light. The traffic cop who the guy was sitting in the middle of the name. Anyway. So what is better world, what is development? But Bhutan is small, Bhutan is like Eden, Bhutan is romanticizing. That is, great as it is. This is the point I wanted to make. I think since my background is finance, I just want to make one point on finance. Because as I said, I started by saying left-hand side of the page to go to right-hand side of the page. Like that, higher. We want to do better. We can argue lah. Obviously GDP is insufficient. But all the other stuff also maybe not fully satisfying, right? Tak apa. But we all know roughly we want to go left to right in what they call it, diagonal way up, right? I think one major impediment right now, my field is finance, is the issue of finance and financialization. Okay? Basically everything is financialized. Academia is financialized, Manchester City is under investigation, and you name it. Politics, maybe, is financialized. And for the, people around us who look at these things, apparently global GDP is what, 100 over trillion, something like that. Assets, financial asset is 5 times more at least, but who the hell knows? Because derivatives, all this, you don't know how to count. And this is even before all the cryptos and stuff like that, right? This thing is like the aquarium, the financial system like the aquarium that is supposed to host all the fish. The fish is now very confused. What, there's big fish, small fish. And this is a problem. You can't do things in business, in politics, in whatever. And this is the problem. There are ways people are trying to, debt is at such a level. Prof will tell you 1971 Richard Nixon went off the gold standard, and you can just chart the amount of financialization increase versus real need. Finance is supposed to serve the real economy, i.e. business is supposed to serve society. You can make a case it's the other way around. People are working like crazy, cost of living crisis, etc., etc. Anyway, that's the stuff I've been looking at, working. Bank Negara asked me, I'm chairing MIFC, Islamic Finance. The problem with Islamic finance, frankly, there's now greenwashing. There's not too much green flagging. Everything called Islamic. Seriously, there's a problem. You put me, and there's something called halal to tayyib, form to substance. Really get to the heart of things and solve real problems. Those are among the calls to action. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Professor Rajah has to go to another event, so he'll just say a few of his closing words, and then we'll carry on after.
No, I just wanted to advertise a chapter done by Melvin Gumar team with Dr. Yunus. They have interviewed several, done a survey of several youths, because 2050 will be their time. I'm not sure if. I doubt I will live that long, but I'm not sure if Tantri will be there. But they have looked at what they want the world to be like. These are youth who will be there. It's a bit like contrasting that sort of a notion, which I think is unique. What they've done is unique in that chapter. The book is Malaysia's Leap into the Future, the Building Blocks for Balanced Development, which was launched late last year. But you also have the other notion, Stephen Hawking, before he dies, He thinks the world will only be around for another, the most 600 years, but likely less than that. But he says in about 100 years, we will have the capacity to move away from planet Earth. He doesn't think planet Earth would last very much. At that time, that capacity would mean you will take 20 light years to move to Jupiter. Surely then, even if it's now, we wouldn't be there. 20 light years to reach there. And he's actually talking about tourism, meaning you go off, say, Jupiter to the next galaxy. A whole range of developments. So I just leave that with you all. But please do look at the chapter that did.
So you'll be off. Thank you so much to Professor Rajah. He really has to rush, and then we'll carry on. We'll carry on as long as we like. Thank you.
One more thing, Rajah, as a life expectancy, we can become immortal as well, right? If you follow some of that. So I'll see you in Jupiter, man. Okay, so I'll continue a quick remark on the youth thing. I just make the remark pretty short. 2017, we had a team offsite where someone came to present some data about terrorism attacks as well as youth unemployment. There basically is a world map of like smaller terrorist attacks and terrorism recruitment activity. And there was also a map about young unemployed males. And it's more or less almost the same. I think that there is a reason why we talk about rebel with a cause, why I think venture capital, technology is like a real potent tool to help empower the youth and also help to kind of include and correct a little bit of this narrative, is that when young people have hope and have jobs, we know that tends to be a better thing. And closer to home, if you look in Malaysia, a lot of folks talk about, say, rumpit culture of, say, motorcycle racing at night. From my experience working with Grab, they've seen actually a lot of uptake from people being rumpit riders into actually Grab delivery folks. So they might as well get an income versus risk themselves, right? So these examples are abound. However, most capitalist activity right now reconcentrates back in the most obvious pools, which is back to Silicon Valley again. So if some of the top capitalists reinvest in Ivy League, reinvest in Silicon Valley, reinvest in most obvious places, you just continue to leave a lot of people out. I'll leave one last example to give us a bit of hope in this optimism as well. At 500, we don't think that's the right thing to do. We think we need to have a portfolio theory, and we love investing in underdog countries. We love investing in the misfits, the challengers. The day Istanbul airport got bombed, 2017 during that offsite, one of our Istanbul partners, she was late because the airport was bombed. She arrived with a newspaper saying that Istanbul airport's bombed, 500 launches a fund in Turkey. So you need equal stories of doom and stories of hope. And with the entrepreneurs that you actually back who come from these places, they all do amazing things. The founders of Bukalapak, this Indonesian unicorn, the first thing he did once he got some pre-IPO kind of like a liquidity for himself, he built an international school in his kampong. In his village, he created a world-class international school. The infrastructure, the teachers, everything from his foundation. That's the first thing he did. So, yeah, so we're empowering the youth and more things to do with the youth. If anyone's working on anything related to youth, like definitely I think a lot of us are big fans here.
Actually, I have another anecdote in that domain. I have a very good friend from infant school, Andrew, and he recently told me about some things he'd done in his life. Before he went to university, he was a camp counselor, a summer camp counselor in Pennsylvania for a period of time. And he said that the kids there, they were so wealthy, some of them were dropped off in limos, some of them were even dropped off in helicopters. But they were so profoundly unhappy. They were just so unhappy. Now, these were kids who would never have to worry in their entire lives about being unemployed, about hungry and homeless. They were going to be taken care of forever, but they were so unhappy. He also spent some time teaching in a village in Kenya, which was 1 hour from the nearest road. So these people were completely cut off from what we'd call the world economy. They had no GDP, they had no money, nothing with which they could engage with the world economy. They lived in harmony with their environment, and they were completely happy. He said that he'd never seen people who were just so content and so happy. So is the future one where the Kenyan villagers acquire GDP and money and interact with the global economy, or the American very wealthy youth somehow learn to detach from that?
If I can give a quick reaction, I think, of course, it's quite romantic and alluring with the kind of unhappy rich people and the happy poor people story. But of course, like, I think the point of those stories are not to correlate those things, right? The point of that story is to say that maybe it's not correlated at all, because you can have very unhappy, very happy rich people and very miserable poor people too, right? And so I think with the point of that story, I think that some of these relationships, like, it goes deeper again back to psychology. It's not as correlated just straight to wealth, right?
Yeah, I don't really want to comment further. Yeah, Khailee said it actually. Actually, I had dinner with Khailee, so happened a few nights ago. And among many things that wowed me, Khailee, this thing you talk about, what? Rumah Kahwin Abang Jamil.
Yeah.
Who the hell is Abang Jamil, by the way?
It's a P. Ramlee character.
P. Ramlee character. Because apparently one of the companies Khailee and 500 backed, what they do is wedding packages lah. Wedding packages, right? Because this one, at least the Malay punya group lah, I'm sure maybe the other races, the people spend way too much money, they go into debt, right? I think in Nigeria they go into debt when they die, which is a bit weird. But you know, we all have our this one. Why? All this like keeping up with the Jonah punya culture lah, this kind of thing. So this fellow's what, 16,000 ringgit. Did I hear that right? Package, and so on and so forth. Amazing, because I thought that's very Islamic finance and whatever you want to call it, right? You structure, because and then they beli this room or rent this house, I don't know, Nilai, Dengkel, somewhere like that, and then do like destination wedding, this one, you know, and so on. I love this. This is youth, this is technology, this is finance, this is entrepreneurship, all coming together with the right heart. You're trying to solve the right problem, not to build a portal for, don't know, some wedding in KLCC where you go in, if you got, what do you call it, hay fever, you cannot lah, too many flowers, wasting money. So I just wanted to, on my side at least, give a few thoughts. So as I said, I started by saying I'm 60% optimist, better world, in spite, and even because of all these challenges. If you get what I'm trying to say, tough times build tough people, resilience. But if we can cross all those, you know, impediments, we can get that up, and this could really change. Okay. For example, YB, I was, you know, I ran GLCs and all these things. But actually, you think about it, 2004, the context was actually just after Asian crisis. So we had to clean up, you know, a lot of stuff like Renong, all these things, like, in addition to, you know, all these former government department become telecom, tenaga, etc., right? But I'm actually a big believer in entrepreneurship. Whether I mean, some of these are meant to be institutions, entrepreneur, but the statecraft, I suppose, is to figure out which is which. With the level of debt in the government, of which you are a party of now, very difficult, right? So in other words, all of us should look less to the government, to GLCs, to GLICs and all these guys. It's up to us. Personal agency, right? Capital, sure. Technology, entrepreneurship, youth, social capital, actually. Very powerful. If you see, like you say, everybody demanding things from the government. This entitlement mentality, we're actually hitting the limits. There's just no more money. Subsidies, what? 70, 80 billion, etc. And as you know, 56% of the subsidy is enjoyed by the T20. Right? This data is well known. So going forward, nonetheless, the optimism, or rather, I want to put 5 things, just for us consideration. We need our democracy, because with the democracy you will need. And guess what? Imperfect as our democracy, I'm talking as a citizen now. To me, imperfect as it is, many things tak betul. However, the last election, what it showed me is that anybody can win, anybody can lose. Okay, consider. Second one, imperfect as our institutions are. I live in Kajang, as you know, trending, hashtag Kajang. Okay, former Prime Minister, very powerful. My boss, actually, my chairman last time, can become in jail right? So former Prime Minister can be prisoner, former prisoner can be Prime Minister. Okay, sure, not all institutions, but this is something to consider, because our journey is always got good, evil, fight. Can be, if you have more good days than bad days, that means we're going forward lah. But that's what it is. No, it's not going to be all plain sailing. Right? Third one, economy. Actually, 4 or 5%. When I go abroad, talk to other people, say, why you worry? You guys are, inequality, yes, issue, but somehow people makan. I mean, sure, we see. I mean, crazy. You saw that graphic in Star, the price of cucumber, all this, lemak, crazy, right? Crazy, but partly I think there must have been generations of technocrats, people who diversified the economy, etc., etc. I think there's still. I came off Penang. Guess what? Intel announced rolling down $7 billion. China fight with US, right? Supply chains are being reconfigured. Boom. Normally and this is during the time, first 61 years in our country, 6 prime ministers, right? Last 5 years, 5 prime ministers. In spite of all this political uncertainty, they still come. Because I think as a nation, this is where we need. Society, kita jaga kita, white flag. I think in spite of all the provocation, this and that, extremists, etc., I think by and large, Malaysians, I hope, so we must fight corruption, we must fight bigotry, we must fight all this abuse of power. If you can get through, I become 60 to 80% optimist. I think we have a chance. And by the way, a lot of this trend, we are not the only one, right, facing all this. Finally, I think let's not forget, there was a time when this bit about freedom to think, freedom to speak, freedom to write, I think the atmosphere is more free, isn't it? I think there's one thing good 2018, I think this has actually made some changes. That wasn't always the case. I grew up throughout all this period. We all grew up. But that is of course precious, and we must do it properly. VC, I'm glad to hear the likes of EPF giving people like you money, because we always, in fact, can announce, we were an early backer of 500, actually. That's how I first got to know, I don't know, quite some time ago, Khailee and his colleagues. 5G, people say controversial how they roll out DNB. Okay lah, that one maybe not the place, or rather can discuss at another time, but the fact that 5G is going to cover at least Peninsula, Sabah, Sarawak, so they should. I think that base actually gives us some possibility of doing some serious rethinking, how we can, move out, for example, youth, places like Tanjung Malim or beyond that has some transport links, that, then digital nomads and all these guys, right? Why must everything, I mean, you were telling me you back companies in Ipoh and places like that, right? So philanthropy, at the end of the day, I think we have to be judged by, I said all these tools are powerful, but they are actually quite value neutral. What put that value is our humanity. And how do we get there is really, to me, that is the key question. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have plenty of questions coming in from the floor, so let's go through them. This is from Mr. Devan, who's on Zoom. Now he's given me 3 questions. I'll try to merge them into one. Malaysia and entrepreneurs, how good are we at creating new and supporting new entrepreneurs in terms of funding and opportunities? Related to that, there's a lot of innovation presented during competitions and so on, but do we get to bring this forward into products and applications, or what is lacking here in terms of implementation? And universities also come up with many ideas and so on, but again, are we lacking in getting them to implementation? So it's about entrepreneurs, ideas, and implementation and support. Either of you?
Okay, I'll answer it quickly. I think that generally is an argument that, there's some duplicate efforts, or a lot of things are not working, and so on and so forth. Like in an early visit to understand venture capital in China many years ago, what we found was that there's 250 government agencies promoting entrepreneurship in China. 250, okay? National, state, local. That's all. I was like, hey, is that too much? And then the Chinese folks who are hosting us, they're like, no, we want competition, right? That's how we want competition between all the agencies to kind of surface the best, right? So we thought, okay, that's very different. Coming back to Malaysia, of course, 2 also is like too much, right? Actually, I think they probably could use even more, in fact, right? Now, in terms... 66. 66, okay, more also is okay, not 250 yet, right? But you know, it's quite good. You see that even like Selangor, like SIDEC, all these, you know, they're trying to raise their own profile on how they can help entrepreneurs. Now, for the question about the university competitions and all that, like more the merrier. You know that you're designing for a non-conversion rate. It's a law of large numbers at some point, right? You need more of these activities for it to feel like it's mainstream. And some of the real stories that emerge from this is some folks who have been judging these competitions, have been through these competitions, next time they'll be working in CIMB. Then they may say, hey, this startup is trying to partner with CIMB. Oh, I remember, I want to support, okay, I want to partner with you. It's like there's a lot of trickle-on effect that is actually very valuable. The direct conversion into entrepreneurs is not the only success metric. The normalization of entrepreneurship and the support of entrepreneurship, that's the win. Right? So I would definitely invite more of kind of the work that you're doing with this contest and other things. You know, we need more of it, if anything.
I agree with all of that. I just want to add the bit about the importance of, there are several layers like entrepreneurship and all this. YB, since you're here on Mosti, that gentleman in the corner, Rizal, put out your hand. He was, when I was at Khazanah, he was the director in charge of tech. So they keep putting me in all these committees, okay? Macam-macam lah, aim lah, what lah. And then I came back, I said, okay guys, I'm confused. I don't understand this. Can somebody do me a map? He said 66 agencies, right? So he came back, okay, boss, he showed me A4 tak cukup. I said, okay, after A4 also A3. Then A3 also tak cukup, and then became A2. Cut long story short, at one national meeting, Prime Minister chairing, I said, sir, we call this a spaghetti map. Okay, it's like a spaghetti bowl, everything all convoluted. And then I said, okay lah, I want to call Laksa also can, tak apa. In the end, the point is, I don't believe at policy level, got to have coherence. You can have whatever number, but it's coherent. But that wasn't the punchline. The minister, who was a friend at that time, said, hey, Azman, give me a copy. He also don't know. But good that he asked. He wasn't shy. Good man. YB Max lah, I can tell. Max, Sarawak, Sabah, right? But at the firm level, I think Malaysians are inherently, I'm told, generally, because people who hire internationally, these are the likes of Citigroup last time, or HSBC, or Shell, because we can deal with ambiguity and all these things. Generally, I think we're quite entrepreneurial. But my issue is actually, you want to build all these things, you cannot look at just Malaysia. Yeah. Nowadays, the game has to be regional or even global. Because regional is equal to, and so on. So the fact, like, you know, someone like Khailee went out, blah, 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 came back, but also look at, I think that's one. The bit about universities, a lot of ideas, yeah, I'm trying to bridge with all these industrial links. Partly our own people also lah. Kalau local dia tak pandang, kurang pandang, want to see, you know, must have foreign punya this kind of thing, which is, you know, we have to have our own confidence lah. But, you know, increasingly I think that will change. Because part of this whole deglobalization theme, actually local is good. Those who can do local, but yet, you know, those things are solid stuff that can go anywhere. Of course, with some adaptation, I think is key. Thank you.
I'm going to just carry on until Yunus makes me stop. So there's a question here. Generally, it's the case that a common enemy usually brings people together, although that's not always a good thing when it happens. But COVID was a common enemy, but unfortunately it didn't seem to bring different societies the world over together. Societies the world over seem to trust each other less and their governments less. How can this be reversed?
I think that there are some spots where organically the opposite is true, right? So we talk about the Kita Jaga Kita, the Bendera Putih thing. You know, once upon a time, when you're growing up in Malaysia, I used to hear like Malaysia Boleh, right? It seems to be repeated enough till you're immersed in it. Subconsciously got brainwashed, Malaysia Boleh, Malaysia Boleh. But after all, it became a joke. Ayo, this badminton player never win. Oh, Malaysia tak boleh. Oh, Malaysia tak boleh. Then suddenly it was like, ayah, Malaysia tak boleh. Then everyone's joking about it. Then it became the meme. It became the viral meme that if you're Malaysian, tak boleh, right? Oh, suck lah. Then, okay, then later on, of course, during Najib's time, one Malaysia. Okay, this is brainwash a bit more, one Malaysia, okay lah, sense of unity over there. But now, what's the meme? What is the Malaysian meme? Hard to say, right? Because it keeps changing around. But Kita Jaga Kita was a meme that was created by the people. By the people. And the people subscribed to Kita Jaga Kita. I am not in politics at all, but if I were a politician now, I'll be like, yo,
don't even know who cooked it up, right?
We don't even know, but it's viral. It works, right? So if I'm like the leader of a country now, I say, oh, hey, since viral already, we hijack lah. Hey, Malaysia, we're known for kita jaga kita. You know, we always help each other. As Malaysians, we always help each other. Doesn't matter what, we always help each other. Okay. Brainwash more of that, repeat more of that. Then you start building these economies of benevolence into the system. Then you don't need to tax the government to fix all your problems, right? You're helping each other fix each other's problems, right? Then you get the peer-to-peer technology thing start to happen, right? So I think to your question and to that kind of like indication over there, I think that, or whoever asked that question, I think that COVID birthed Kita Jaga Kita. That spirit was always there, and it found its expression. If we fan that fire, I think it's one of the most valuable things we've discovered in COVID so far, for this country at least.
Tansri, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have seen this group of people who, a kind of citizens movement that fills up potholes, right? You saw that? Yeah. I don't know these guys, right? I said, wow, amazing, right? They don't care, like DBKL or whoever. Pothole, go. This is like rockers and whatever else, right? You see, start like midnight, before Subo finish, right? That kind of thing. Amazing, right? Citizen movement, of course, of the right type. Because now the tools are there lah, you know, apa nama, tech, money, somehow people crowd fund, this kind of thing, right? And you don't need very big money. I think there's a common disdain lah, YB. Not you lah, you know, the elites. No, actually not just me. Elite CEOs, experts, people are very, and rightly so, people are skeptical, cynical of. Even, you know, the tech firms that were once cool have become, you know, big and ugly lah, right? And that, I think, again, like, go back to the nature of our species lah, you know, when we kind of forget, like Lord of the Rings, right? What the hell is the ring? The ring is nothing lah, but everybody you go to the ring, all go gila. Except for Frodo. Frodo is pure, right? Frodo is pure, so he deserves the ring. And I think that's what Tolkien's key message, actually.
Okay, I've received my instructions from Eunice, but we're just going to ask two more questions. I just wanted to comment. I think there's this great paradox here. On the one hand, I keep hearing that Malaysia is more racially divided than it was when everyone in this room was a child, and yet during COVID, we see the opposite of that. We see this great compulsion for unity and working together as a society. So it's interesting, and I'd like to think, of course, that it's the latter one that is the truth. But moving on for questions. We missed the great opportunity to press the reset button during COVID for Malaysia. Education and liberalization in many areas could have been given a jump start to the country economically. Question, would we have another opportunity to redraw the country and give it a boost? From Riaz on Zoom.
We heard a lot about this thing about Great Reset, remember? So as I said, somehow I ended up on this National Recovery Council. Before you all smirk, remember this was a bipartisan thing. It was actually quite interesting. Among us, I think we had quite a lot of this one because, you know, all these agencies will come. The politics is another level. So when you talk about reset, the computer that I know I'm not very clever. When you want to reset, what do? You press 3 buttons, no? Control, alternate, delete. Okay, this is the metaphor. Control, to do reset, you need power. Control is power, right? Of course, power hopefully comes with principles, maybe. Very important. Alternate means you got to have a plan, you got to have a view, right? The delete is political will. And to be fair to the politician, it's not just the politician, civil service. All of us, public also, we talk a lot, right? We talk a lot. We also, good, we should. People have a right to me, but somehow civil society, and that's part and parcel of the noisiness. I suppose a lot of us compare to Indonesia, right? They went through, don't know how long, post Suharto, before SBY, right? SBY had 10 years, and then Pak Joko now got 10 years. Before that, don't know, they changed how many times. But it was noisy. Normally, the economists, Prof not here, will tell you, people start talking about voice, democracy, when you hit $10,000 US per capita. Indonesia at 3,000, they were hitting KKN, Reformasi, and whatever else. Interesting. But they were noisy. Lots of entrepreneurs there, right? The entrepreneurial spirit Indonesia gila. You know, social entrepreneurs, commercial entrepreneurs, partly big market lah. So here actually we want to see the energy. Don't want all this rote learning, thinking people should be questioning, I hope. And I hope the decency, the humanity in all of us will somehow manage that lah. And it starts obviously at all levels lah. Yunus and people like Yunus, people like Khailee, Rajah. I think we are all, hopefully we all have a personal duty to bridge all these things, right? We all got to do. We all have to do actually. So to me, forget about thinking too much about the government, all this thing. Personal agency lah. For me, balik-balik, can talk about institutions, can talk about nation building, can talk about finance, can talk about tech, entrepreneurship. I think in the final analysis, like what Gandhi said, right? Be the change that you want to be, something like that you want to be. I think to me that's very powerful. Because actually during COVID, a lot of time to think, okay? Too much time, you PK, you read, all these things. At the end of the day, then, to me, if there's one big positive of COVID, I'm lucky, like, a lot of people were struggling, we have the comfort or whatever, like, kind of thing. So, and that has to be the way forward. And then power agency, and then the power of the collective, we all, our society, and then those of us who are running and building institutions. I believe in institutions. The institution is the bulwark against, whatever vagaries of time, power shifts, individual whims, that kind of stuff, right? We must build and rebuild institutions. So our starts with a few, and this to me is very, very important. If all of us leave the world slightly better than when we enter, then by definition, better world. Back to your topic. Thank you.
Khailee?
I'll give a quick metaphor. I think the question asked is that, okay, did we just waste the Great Reset? Do we need to wait for another reset? To stick with the computer metaphor, if you reset your computer but you're running on, say, Windows 95, you will still reboot in Windows 95. You know what I mean? So, yeah. You won't go suddenly, I reset my computer. I started like Windows 97. Reset it, I got Windows XP. None of that. You need a virus. Change is a meme, okay? Widespread change, very dangerous. There's what Arab Spring, all that, People feel empowered all of a sudden. Then you have like, I'm not talking about birthday rally type of memes. I think Tan Sri Azman's invitation of remembering what empowerment really means is you empower yourself. That's giving yourself freedom. Earlier on, I think I opened up with like freedom versus slavery. Slavery is you thinking somebody else needs to fix your problems. Freedom is saying, hey, I can fix my own problems, okay? So we can kita jaga kita, I can fix his problem too. He can fix my problem too. That virus of the mind, when infected, suddenly your Windows XP is functioning different from somebody else's machine altogether. Someone you can't underestimate the power of like a collective society that takes care of each other, that also works in tandem with its government. Right now, democracy has invited a lot of debate, which is fantastic. But what it means is that a society that works against its government all of the time, no matter what, who's going to win? Who's going to win? We have a chance to work together in this reset. And I think that virus, whether we install a more empowering set of belief systems, that's really the unlock.
Thank you. The last question is actually very similar to what we've had before about rewriting or changing the global order. So instead I'll do something completely off script. I'll take one question from the floor, from anyone, and I'll pass them the mic. This is your opportunity, because this does require someone from the floor to put their hand up. Thank you.
When we talked about happiness, I was in Japan last month. And typically the Japanese come across very courteous, very polite. These are all signs of happy people, happy population. But then you look at the happiness index, among the developed world, they're the lowest. So I spoke to a classmate of mine who's a Japanese, and he said that number one, that happiness index metrics was wrong, because the Japanese expectation or understanding of happiness is very different. And as Prof was mentioning earlier, the level of expectation, the higher it is, the lower the happiness would be. It correlates. So when I was a child, I remember as a family we went 3 holidays in my entire childhood. Twice to Penang, 1 to Singapore. I still remember those holidays. It was the happiest moments. Nowadays my kids expect 3 holidays a year. And that during that pandemic, they were like completely unhappy. We were like, they felt that they haven't been enslaved. So all I'm saying is, when you keep that expectation higher and higher, the level of happiness will be lower and lower. And I think what I learned from this is, no point measuring happiness. There's no universal scale. In fact, what we will end up is what's happening in ESG today. We spend 80% of our time measuring. First trying to create a taxonomy, what we all mean by green and social, and then spend a lot of time trying to measure. And what we have realized, trying to do it in CIMB group, not everything can be measured. And not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that is measurable matters. So we find that if we create that expectation, that this is what the level is. And this Japanese friend mentioned to me, if you go to Akihabara, you go to any shop, Yodobashi, you want to buy a TV, there are like 200 models. And when you choose one, he says, because there's so much of choice, the paradox of choice thing comes in, they will never be happy. When come home, they'll say, I think the other TV could have been better. So I think by giving more choices, we're actually taking away happiness. So I think, I don't know what's the answer. Do we limit our choices? Or do we try to go back to the golden years where we had less? It reminds me of Schumacher when he wrote that book, Small is Beautiful. It was written in the 80s, but I think it's very profound. And he talks about the Buddhist concept of happiness, like what you mentioned about Bhutan as well.
I think that choice, we have to make it for ourselves. Because if Kim Jong-il made the choice for you, like, the choice to have less choice, like you want somebody else to do that for you, basically, right? So I think, again, it's back to that individual agency, like to promote the idea, use your own thinking, and then choose like a set of beliefs that empower you. I think that makes, hopefully that's a bit easier to swallow.
No, I'll just share. My aha moment on this subject was I was a relatively young man still searching for my cause, put it that way, in your language. My auntie, who has since passed away, my dear auntie, she was simple lady, actually not simple at all, very wise. Matron at Sultan Aminah Hospital in Johor Bahru. So, matrons are, amazingly resourceful people. She said, man, kaya tu cukup, miskin tu tak cukup. That's it. If you feel you have enough, you're rich. If you're still not enough, still like, then you're not happy, right? That one, you're poor. But then I modify it along the way. You cannot, you have to strive, right? You have to strive. You cannot put your bar low. Your bar must be high. In fact, that part I'm very greedy, ambition. Bar ideals must be very high. But then, of course, you become a realist. Then you say, okay, but this is what I got. Fine. Enough, kan? That is cukup. Contentment doesn't mean complacency. Anyway, it's slightly philosophical. Dr. Yunus, he knows a lot.
Yeah, Yunus has a smile. He's a consistent smile on his face. You can't take it away from him, Freedom right there.
The longer time I spent with him, I actually started to become the most cynical friend to the most cynical person. But he's cynical still can smile, That's the beauty there.
Yeah, Yunus is one of the happiest, consistently happiest people I know. He's always happy. What's the secret? Can you sell it to me in a bottle?
He's single.
So imagine he's single like this. But find him.
Okay, so to close, I'd like to invite the Honourable Deputy Minister to give us any closing thoughts. Would you like to take the podium, or?
Just now, Tan Sri mentioned that tough people are made during tough times, created during tough times. And that's very correct, because during my younger age, I used to hear my parents, friends, or whomever I met, who were much older than me, used to keep repeating about their experiences during Japanese occupation, during the wartime. Even during my school days when I was in primary school, the teachers used to mention, during Japanese time, we were made to work like this. We were made to learn Japanese. And my Tamil school teacher could speak Japanese. I mean, at least she could even write Japanese. So they were made to work harder. And there was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of, they had to work harder in. But during pandemic, it was also a tough time, but it was in the opposite. People was just staying at home, were not doing anything, and they had to adapt to the culture of working from home. So this has actually left a negative impact in most of the people. They are not that resilient. They've sort of like, a lot of have gone into mental health issues, have become not very productive. They are just contented with their... So this is the challenge that we have post-pandemic. How do we create or trigger how could we trigger them to come back to the point prior to COVID, meaning that the urge to go to work, earn, progress in life, and do a lot more things, go for activities, take part in activities, all this has come to a lower level. And this is what's, from the entrepreneurial perspective, we have lost a huge chunk of youth to the gig economy. They've become, a lot of youth have chosen to become Grab riders and all those Grab riders, Panda, Food Panda and all that, which is bringing more income, but less of thinking, less of effort. So that's the youth who could have become, if they had really remained in the ecosystem, the future entrepreneurs. So we have a challenge when we train, either as a job seeker under the Human Resource Ministry. Basically, they are trained to become a skilled job seekers, or from our ministry, entrepreneurial development, to become future entrepreneurs. But the effort taken prior to 2020, when we check all these, where are all these people? Most of them are Grab riders and all that. So this is the challenge that we have as far as youth of today, and they want a life of the life that they've already experienced during the period of COVID, and not the life that the youth of during the wartime. So that's one thing. And the period of pandemic has also made people to realize value of money. Those who didn't really bother, just like life was going on, I earn money, I spend money, I earn money, I spend money. But now people have, there was pause when they think back the lifestyle, now they come to feel that they need to have savings. So the savings for hard time. So when there is such feeling, but they start to think of other means of getting income, and the other means is if it is a legal means, but even if it is like becoming a Grab rider instead of doing something for lesser price, let's say lesser value. Let's say if you are working in an office, you get 1,500. If you're doing a business of your own, you can earn 2,500. But if you are a Grab rider, you can earn 4,000, save 2,000. That becomes the priority. So these are the challenges that right now we are facing. And our government has also come up with a slogan, inclusive development. So when we talk about inclusive development, we need to think about this group, not only inclusive in the sense of the racial division. When we say inclusive development is to bring these people back to think of the future, and is it that only being a Grab rider or anything that is simple that brings they are comfortable with is going to be their lifelong career. So that's youth have to be brought into the inclusive economic development. And the other area I would like to stress is like for example, in Tapa, just now somebody was mentioning that there's a country where people travel 1 hour to get to the main route. In Tapa, the secondary school children travel 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day to come to school and to return. And during the pandemic, they have realized that before that it was just a routine thing. Okay, this is our fate. We go to school, we come back, we travel 4 hours, we come back. This is our norm. This is our life. But post-pandemic, they feel the discrimination. Why can't a school be built in their locality? And there are about 9,000 just voters in Tapa. So these are the post-COVID challenges that we have, because people have started to think, compare, and make decisions based on other factors which didn't matter to them before COVID. And for example, again, going back to the Orang Asli community, we have poverty, and right now we say that poverty is multi-dimensional. And one of the reasons for the Orang Asli poverty is alcoholism. A lot of people, during the COVID, when the men had no work to do, they indulged more. I mean, of course, the Orang Asli community are famous for being, after work, they indulge in alcoholism and all those things. But they lost a lot of the head of the family because of alcoholism. So during the election, the female voters were very supportive of me, because I just raised one point. Because when I went there was a funeral. When I was supposed to go to one of the settlement, there was a funeral, so I cancelled. I just visited the family, and the guy had committed suicide. So when I was talking to them, I could sense the women have started to feel post-COVID that the men should be rehabilitated from alcoholism. And if that happens, it will help to, one, social, the family problem, number two, economic improvement, because it's two members of the family earning. So again, that's the, when they introspect, when they see, okay, this is how we have been trained to think all this while, it's okay for the politicians to go and serve drink and all that. So these are the new kind of challenges we are. So what is the demand of the Orang Asli now? We want a rehabilitation center to rehabilitate the men. So, and we have about 150,000 in Semenanjung, Malaysia. And imagine if it's 50% of the Orang Asli population are already addicted to alcoholism. We need to when that's what I understand as inclusive development and entrepreneurship for those who need meaning, is these are the people who have to be brought to the mainstream and be given the right opportunity and given the right, their needs are addressed, so that there will be a real inclusive economy, and we address the post-COVID situations in a more better and comprehensive manner. And I think that should be the goal of the government of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to hand things back to the MC, please.
Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope it has been a beneficial evening for everyone present today. Let's give another round of applause for everyone participating in the talk today. I would like to now invite Yang Berhormat Senator Saraswati Kandasamy to present a few tokens of appreciation that we have prepared. I'd also like to invite alongside her Dr. Muhammad Yunus Yassin. Please welcome Mr. Imran. Thank you. Please welcome Tan Sri Azman Mokhtar. And Khailee Ng. Thank you. I'd like to now invite Dr. Yunus to present a token of appreciation to YB Saraswati. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the evening. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you in other programs. Have a good evening and drive safe. Bye-bye.